I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. If you like the honest reviews, you want to win a Compass 2 SE, click on the link below, and you can get entered in to win this in September 2018. So, link is going to be active down there. Click it, and support me on my videos. That would be awesome. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Drone Camps channel. Today I'm going to help you build another drone. This is the TERO Q215. It's a 215mm drone. We're going to put it together, step by step, right after this. Skywatch.Ai insurance is on demand, and anytime you need it, check out the link below. Alright, you can follow along with this video if you're just building this drone. This is going to be a great video because I'm not going to skip too many steps here. We're going to pretty much show you the entire build. So go ahead and get yourself a drink. Kick back and relax. If you bought this kit, this is awesome for you because we're going to show you everything that's included here, and we're going to show you how to build stuff. So these are the motors, 2206, pretty standard. 2600 kV is not too bad, not super high and not super low. And also the motor wires on here are silicone, which I love, and you get these little braided cords that go over top of your motor wires just to make it a little more fancy. And you get 4 of these in total. It would be nice if some of these kits gave you 5 motors, because whenever I order parts, when I'm going to build my own quad, I always want 1 extra motor on hand. So as you can see, these are also clockwise and counterclockwise. This is your clockwise, and the left one, the silver one, is your counterclockwise motor. And we're going to build this in the standard Betaflight setup. If you're used to running Betaflight, they usually come with right turn rear. That means right turn prop goes on the rear, the right rear, and these braided cords are a little bit hard to put over the motor wires, just as a note for you guys. And this is the next motor here, and you get 4 of these motors, like I said before. And I'll just speed that up a little bit because yeah, we know what 4 motors looks like, Justin. So also the 5.8 pagoda antenna comes in there. That's an SMA connector, and this looks like the camera. So we're gonna go ahead and open this up. This almost looks like a Runcam Eagle Micro sort of clone. It does have a red cover over it. I think they want it to look like an eagle. And look at that, a little bit closer up. It does look strikingly similar to the Runcam Eagle. It's 1/3 sensor inside, 2.1mm lens, and 3 wire ports on the back with no camera control. It doesn't look like there's any type of joystick camera control. And let's see what this next package is in here. Another surprise for you for this kit. You've got your XT60 in here, and you have that R. Charlance branded 30 amp BL Heli ESC. It says on their website, on GearBest website, you could run this from like 2 to 6S. I think I would stick to 4S on this, just to be safe. You have your battery terminals in the back, your motor tabs on the outside right there, and a plug and play harness in the very front, which is super easy. So we're just going to plug that wire in, and the next pack I'm going to show you actually has all of your wire harnesses in there. There's not a whole lot of soldering we have to do on this kit, which is really nice. And if you have to replace anything, this, I believe the ESC, 4-in-1 ESC is about $30. So if you had one of those ESCs go out and you had to replace it, it's not like a $65 ESC. And I would probably run 4S on this type of setup. This really wouldn't be a 6S machine. I don't think these motors are rated for it. So we've got our ESC cable there, camera cable, VTX cable, MMCX connector with SMA, and our receiver wire there. All plug into the ports on this F4 Pro here. This is the version 2. This is a really nice flight controller and VTX combo. And it does look like it has the smart card right there. You can put your micro SD card in. That is pretty awesome. With your USB port here for Betaflight and your LED there, and you have a little button right here for changing your channels and bands, and your power up to like 800 milliwatt. That'll get you out there for miles, guys. Like, that's super far on 5.8. As long as you have a nice helical antenna with plenty of turns, maybe something over 8 turns, you can get way out there. These are your zip ties. That's nice they include those. They didn't used to give us zip ties in our kits, but now they do, which is great. You get a battery strap with a metal buckle. You get some little hard plastic there for the bottom for the battery to go up against, sort of grippy plastic. And this is your battery bounce, usually battery bumper. I usually put that on the bottom of the battery. You get your LEDs and 1 capacitor in there. It's a pretty big capacitor there, a 25V 25 volt and 1000 micro ohms. That's pretty sweet there. Let's go ahead and see what else we got in there. This is our hardware pack. So we're going to open this up, and whenever I do a build, guys, it's really important to go ahead and sort all of this. Put them all in individual piles. I usually do that before I start to build. And then this is the quad frame itself, which is super cool. It does look very similar to a floss, but it's not an exact clone, so all you clone guys, don't freak out or anything. Clone trolls. So I gotta say, I just did a build video for you guys last week, and looking at the quality of this carbon fiber, it looks way better than the TYRO99's carbon fiber. This kit is actually about $10 more, and what I'm seeing here so far, it looks like we have better stuff included with this kit for an extra $10 to $12. And what I really like about this kit, you're gonna see here, if I can get the camera to go into focus for you. There we go. Check this out. You have surface flush screws that are going to go in there. The hardware is flush with the surface. That is great. So you don't have any stuff sticking out the bottom of the quad, which is going to be really nice for putting your battery on there, because it's not going to rub up against your battery like the TYRO99. You're not going to have to get super creative, put your battery on the bottom. And this is your sort of mounting plate with already has all of the hardware in there. So these lock nuts, you're just going to screw right into those with your hardware, and you'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and move on to the first part of the build series, and I'll go ahead and get you started. You also get 2 sets of props in the box, and red and green is what I got. These are 50-48 tri-props. They do have a pretty wide cord in the middle, and if you're new to building, it says R on this one. It's really hard to see, but this one's your right turn prop. The other one that's going to be opposite of this, the left turn, is not going to say anything on it, so it's just going to say the number. That's how you tell the difference. And also the leading edge is going to the right there. Alright, so step 1, guys, go ahead and clear off your bench, and we're going to build the bottom of the frame first. So grab your razor blade and open up your hardware pack, and you're going to pull everything out of this package. Now what I generally like to do is go ahead and get an idea, because you've never seen any of this hardware before. I like to lay it all out, and I like to sort it by size. This looks like the motor screws right here, so I'm going to set those apart somewhere else, and those look like they're 5 to 6 millimeter standard M3 bolts right there. And we can use Loctite on those, by the way, so get some Loctite for this build. It's always good. Just a little dab of Loctite is kind of nice. Now let me show you what's in this pack. This is the rest of the flush fit hardware. This is all M3. So you're going to use your M3 driver for this. You can see how those are kind of countersunk. These are awesome. These are really nice. So much better already than the TYRO99. And it's $10 more. So this is super awesome. It looks like Gearbest has a TYRO99 competitor with a nicer frame, beveled edges on the carbon fiber. We have metal standoffs, which I really like. 4 bolts to release this top plate is also awesome, and it's a super kind of low profile style frame, which I like a lot. Now this is really cool right here. They give you extra little lock nuts right here, and the ones that are on the frame right there, those are already embedded into the carbon, and they're black, so they're barely noticeable. But if you need any replacements, they give you a full extra set of replacements right here. Look at this. This is awesome. They're silver, but this is a full extra set. You don't actually have to use these during the build. So that's really nice of them to do that in this kit, because sometimes you lose one little piece of hardware and you can't finish a build. Now these have to go underneath the ESCs. Don't lose those. There's only 4 of them. And we have some little standoffs, and those are going to go right above the ESC once we start making our stack. And then some screws are going to go down through the top of these through your VTX and flight controller. So those are pretty easy to put on. You can actually put those on by hand. So now let's check out the frame here. And the arms do look strikingly similar to the floss, but it's not a complete clone because it has to be an exact match to be a complete clone. That looks nice. Really nice, polished. And one thing that I did notice is that my hands got way less dirty handling all of this carbon versus the TYRO99 carbon. It was not really cleaned off that much after it was CNC'd in China, so a lot of the carbon was really dirty. My hands were almost like I had been handling a newspaper. That's a bunch of carbon dust. This looks like it was polished pretty nice. We've got 5mm arms, 3mm top and bottom plates there, back plate. This is your back plate, and then this other plate over here, these are the smaller ones, are your camera mounts right there. Those stand also go in the very front. You have two positions to mount to. You can do the sliding position, or you can do that sort of singular position in the middle, which is what I usually use, because I just loosen a nut, or a bolt rather, and then I adjust my camera angle. So now we're ready to use our driver and get it together. Alright, so go ahead and grab these two pieces of carbon, this bottom plate and the top plate there, and all this is going to be on the bottom, but this is going to be the very bottom of the quad. Everything is flush mount down here. I love that, so we don't have any bolts sticking up to rub on the battery. Now grab your longer bolts with that flush mount top, and we're going to go ahead and feed it through the bottom plate there. And you'll see it comes completely flush with the bottom of the frame. We're going to do these 4 bolts right there. Stick your arm on there next, and go ahead and grab that top plate. And you can just go ahead and start sort of getting the bolt into the nut, starting it with your finger, and then grab your driver and go ahead and get it pretty well seated. Not all the way, you can leave it just a little bit loose for now. We're going to go back and we're going to tighten up all this stuff a little bit later. It's just easier to make everything a little bit looser at this point, so you can move the parts around when you need to feed the screws up through. But let me go ahead and grab one of these pieces. This is a little white spacer. The ESC is going to go just above that white spacer right there, and I'll just show you how that works. Once you get all of your arms on here, we'll do this step, but for now I just wanted you guys to see what this is going to shape up like. So we got the black one on top of that. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and put these down, and go ahead and pause the video and solder up these tabs. You're going to do your motor tabs on the outside edges and the battery terminal tabs there. And the battery cable is going to come off the right side of the quad, and the harness is going to be on the left right here. So it's just going to seat right down on top of these little terminal posts right here. And we're going to have the capacitor there as well, and 3 wires for each motor. So if you've never built a quad before, if this is your very first video, this is how it's going to go down. We're going to go ahead and grab this little spacer here, put that on there, so everything is good. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab the harness for your signal wires, and those are nice because you used to have to solder up all these individually, and now you don't. So they make these nice little harnesses that plug into these 4-in-1 ESCs. Just make sure that your teeth are facing the right way when you plug in the harness. If they're not, go ahead and flip that around. Just be careful you don't push too hard on it the first time. If it's wrong, you can bend the teeth. So now I'm going to bend this under here. We're going to go just underneath the ESC and have it coming out the front like that. And you can tidy up the wire a little bit just by twisting it up a little bit right there, so you won't have much excess hanging out the bottom of the quad. Now I can go ahead and start on the motors, because we're getting these prepped up to solder each of the wires over to each ESC terminal. Now you can trim that off as well. You're going to have to trim these much shorter to get these wires through. For me to pull these wires through here was kind of a pain. Probably my least favorite part of this entire build was these wire the covers just seem to be a little bit small. So go ahead and grab some thread lock as well. And you're going to put a little dab of thread lock on the end of your bolt and wipe it off with your fingers. I usually just wipe it off on a paper towel sitting next to my build area. Just put a little tiny bit on there. You don't need a whole lot. And the reason you're wiping this off is because you don't want it leaking down and leaching down inside your motor stator. It's not good to have any of that Loctite touching inside the motor. So the next thing you want to do is make sure that collar is not rubbing on the inside of this well right here, because if it is rubbing, it can short out your motor. Now we're going to go ahead and clean off the soldering tip of your pin. I'll try to put a link down below for this iron, because I've been using this a lot lately for my builds, and I have a 4S1300, and it pretty much lasts an entire build because we're not doing a whole lot of soldering in this build. This is pretty easy. So once I've cleaned off the tip, I'm going to go ahead and put a little more solder on there. And we're going to tin these up and get these ready. I like to usually do this because it adds just a little fresh 60/40 solder to whatever Chinese solder they used in the factory. I'm not usually a big fan of that. Sometimes it comes in and it looks a little bit like a cold solder. Like it's, in other words, cheap solder. And that looks pretty good. So now we can go ahead and solder up our first 3 wires. So this is motor number 1 right here, and if you look really closely, you can see an M1 just to the left of that post. Now these wires are different lengths, so what you're going to do is grab your longest one first and take a trip to Harbor Freight and grab yourself some of these tweezers. They're awesome. It's impossible to hold these wires and with your fingers, because it's going to burn your finger pretty good if you're trying to hold this wire. The wire gets super hot when you're soldering it down. So I usually come in on sort of an angle right here. I'm just going to clean the tip one more time before I do any new solders. Make sure it's nice and clean. Add a little more solder to the tip and go ahead and grab it with the tweezers again. And I'm on an angle right here, but you have to be really careful that you don't bridge or touch the next one over, the next wire over. That none of this solder or anything sticking out off the wire. If you have any excess wire sticking out, you can make contact with the next terminal over and you can have burnt up ESC. And with 4-in-1s, you know, then you've got to replace the ESC, and that just sucks. So, but they are getting cheaper. This is not the most expensive ESC stack in the world. And 30 amp is pretty nice. Again, I wouldn't run 6S on this. 4S 1300 is great for beginners. So wait until both pieces of metal heat up nice. Don't push down the heat too long on these little tabs, because the little tabs can actually separate from the ESC and you can not be able to fix that. So, and if you mess up, and occasionally I do, sometimes I let go before it's ready, before it's really seated. You can redo it. And I usually like to just come off like that. Yep, and there I go. And it takes a couple seconds for it to cool off enough for you to let go. So just be patient. And you want to make sure that you see that little bit of sizzle there. If you're using some kind of magnifying glass, that's good, because you can see that solder start to sizzle on both pieces of metal. And now you're just going to tuck those wires under a little bit, and we're going to run a zip tie around this this end of the wire cover right there. But these look pretty shiny, and there's no cold solders going on, so I'm pretty happy with that. We're going to repeat the process for the next 3 motors all the way around, and then we're going to go to the next step. So go ahead and pause the video and do your motors up. So at this point, your solder should look something like this, and we can reverse the direction later inside BL Heli, but they should look nice and shiny like this. Now go ahead and grab the Loctite. Make double sure that all of your bolts on your motors are nice and Loctited, and that you put this little battery pad on the bottom, and everything looks nice and flush down here. I just put mine across that direction. You can do it either way, front to back if you like, and you have plenty of space down there for your battery strap. I noticed I had one little piece of solder there on the frame, so I'm going to make sure I get that off before I move on. But this is looking pretty good. Everything looks evenly spaced here, and now I can go ahead and take some zip ties and just go ahead and tidy off the end of these motor wire covers right here. This braided cord over top of these motor wires. I love this motor wire because it's not plastic motor wire like the TYRO99 has. If I touch my iron to this, it doesn't melt and expose the wire, which is really great. Especially if you're a new guy. If you're building your first drone, you don't want to deal with burning the motor wires because you made a mistake with the iron, which happens quite a bit with new people. So we're going to go ahead and put another zip tie on the end of this, and hopefully you're following along with this. And if it does get too quick here, just go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to get that snug but not overly tight. You want it so that it doesn't move up and down the arm, and you're going to do that for each of the arms, and you're going to do one on each end there. And if you don't have zip ties this size, you can actually find these smaller ones at Home Depot. They do have packs of them there, or you can pick them up on Amazon. Now next we can go ahead and grab the capacitor here. You see this negative side on here. You can trim these back a little bit, and these are going to go on the inside of the terminal, and my battery wires are going to go on the outside of the tab. So something like this. You see negative goes here, positive there. And make sure you don't mess that up, because if you mess that up, you're going to have a shorted out quad. A lot of new guys mess up right here, because when you go to plug things in, you get a puff of white smoke, and that's definitely what you don't want to see. So I'm going to go ahead and get this situated, and we'll get ready to tin up both of these wires right here. So if you have helping hands, this helps a lot, because it's going to be really hard to hold this wire. You're not going to be able to hold it. It's going to get really hot. So I like to go ahead and bend these wires over sort of flat with a pair of needle nose pliers, just like that. And the reason that we do this is we want this wire to sit flat on the terminal. You don't want it to be at an angle, any kind of tilted angle, so that only one part's connecting to the tab. You want that whole part of that motor wire sitting as flat as possible on the tab when you make these connections. It's just going to be a lot stronger, and it's not likely to pop off. So you can go ahead and shorten these a little bit, which they usually come longer in case you have to tuck it up away somewhere. But for this build, I'm actually going to make them a little bit shorter there, and they're going to go on just on the inside of the terminal like that. So the first one we'll start with is going to be the negative side, and then we'll do the positive side after that. But I'm going to go ahead and grab my helping hands here, and we're going to go ahead and tin up the battery lead wires real quick. And these come pre-tinned from the factory, but again, like I always pre-tin things, because hey, some of the solder coming out of the Chinese warehouses kind of sucks. So it's better to use your own solder that you trust. And some of you guys have been soldering for years anyway, before you built before you built your first quad. So you know what good solder is. 6040 is usually pretty good. You can also get lead-free solder, which is also kind of nice. But some people don't like lead-free because they say it doesn't work as good, which might be the truth. And I'm also using a fume extractor as well, so you can see those fumes kind of exiting to the right side of the screen right there. And I use a fume extractor from Hacko. It's about $800. It's kind of expensive, but it has a carbon filter inside, so it's not filling up my shop with solder fumes. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and make this solder right here, and be a little bit liberal with your solder right here. You don't want the solder to bridge over into the middle of the ESC, so kind of keep your solder pin on both the terminal tab and on the battery wire, because you want to expose both pieces of metal to the heat from the pin. So this is very important that you get both pieces equally hot, or otherwise you're going to get a cold solder. Or if you don't solder it, or you don't have it on there long enough, it's going to look kind of a little bit tarnished looking, a little bit flat. If it doesn't look shiny, you didn't get a good connection. So that looks pretty good. You always give it a tug there to make sure that it's seated properly. And like I said before, be careful, extra careful that you don't, I'm just going to go ahead and clean my tip off again. And be extra careful that you don't apply heat too long to these tabs, because these are also really easy to mess up. And use a decent iron, guys. Don't use one of those Wellers from Home Depot. Those are like the worst. I swear they're the worst soldering irons known to man for this type of work. I'm just going to add a little more solder in there, because solder helps transfer the heat very quickly. Once you have a little bit of solder, a little extra solder, it really helps get things flowing. So I don't like how long this one is. It looks like it's sticking out just a little bit long, so I'm going to trim this one back. And also on your bench, be careful that some of this excess metal doesn't get up inside the motors of your quad, because a little bolt or something could short out your motor. So a lot of times before I go do a maiden flight, I'm always checking the bottom of my motors to make sure that, and I twist them with my fingers So that looks pretty good there. We've got the negative and the positive right there. That's looking pretty good. Very nice. And we can take a zip tie and zip tie off this battery cable, because you don't want it pulling these tabs off of your ESC. It'll ruin the ESC. So everything is pretty well seated, and now we're pretty much to the point where we can grab the flight controller and we can seat the flight controller. And we have 3 here, 3 down bottom, and 3 at the bottom left there. This all looks nice and shiny, and you want to make sure that you have this in the right order, because you want to be able to have your quad running in a maiden for the first time properly. If you have this flipped around the wrong way, the ESC will run your motors the wrong direction, and you'll have your quad flip across the ground. So now we've got a little closer look at this, and you want to make sure this arrow is facing forward. Up front here we have the harness that's going to come from the ESC. Right here is going to be your camera harness, and over here we have the LED port right there, and right here is going to be your receiver port, and your MMCX connector is going to go up to your SMA and out the back of your quad for your 5.8 antenna. This is your LED, and your button right there to change your channels and bands, and your power all the way up to 800, and then this is going to be your black box recording SD card slot right there. So I'm going to go ahead and fit this down, and a lot of times I put things down and eyeball it first. I suggest you kind of do the same thing before you just start screwing stuff down. I'm going to go ahead and seat this cable. That's looking pretty good. So we got the camera cable here. This is your signal wire, 5 volt and ground there. And sometimes the signal wire for your camera is either going to be white and sometimes yellow. We go ahead and grab the LED wire. We're going to put that in right there. And this is awesome because you don't have to do any soldering in any of this stuff right here. This makes it really easy for new guys. And I've got my receiver wire, and that is looking pretty good there. So now you can go ahead and put these shorter bolts through, and you can lock down the flight controller to the stack. But if you have any type of grommets, rubber grommets to put underneath the flight controller or the ESCs, I would always suggest doing that. It gives it a little bit of a dampening. So now go ahead and put the other bolts on there, and you should have 4 just like this holding the flight controller down. So now we can go ahead and move on to the next step. We're going to solder up the receiver wires to your XM Plus, and that little gold tab is going to be where the side where your signal wire goes, and that's going to be the white wire right here. So just go ahead and be liberal with your solder, but not too much. You don't have to hold the heat to this one as quite as long as some of the other ones. Just make sure that everything is melted there, and if you do want to do this right, you want to tin up your receiver wires. If you snip those off on the end, you're just going to go ahead and apply some heat there just like that. Looking good. Alright, so this is your 5 volt wire, nice and shiny. Not bad. Now you're going to grab your black wire, that's your ground wire. And once you do this one, you should be good to go, and then you can plug in your receiver to that port I showed you earlier. Let's go ahead and get some heat to the ground wire. If I can get it in there. That's what she said. Yeah. There you go. Sometimes, you know, these little wires move around a lot, so be patient with these. Alright, right on. Now just give it a little bit of a tug, and you should be good to go. That looks pretty good there. Awesome. So now we can move on to putting the camera together with the sidewalls. And this is really easy right here. You just want to make sure that your camera is facing up like this, and you have only 3 wires on the back of this camera. So you're going to grab these smaller bolts and put those through each sidewall. And I like to go ahead and install the camera to the sidewalls. Some people do it afterwards, but I find it's always easier to do it just like this. And I'm going to figure out which hole that I want to install this in, whichever gives me the best protection. You can go a little further back, but sometimes you might be seeing part of the quad, so you have to make that decision where you want to put your camera through. So you can try it right there, or we can try another spot, whichever works the best. It gives you the best clearance, because you don't really want to see the front of the quad. And I might not settle with that. I might actually do something different. Now once you get both sides screwed into the vertical posts, you notice there's two slots right here. One is for the larger style camera, that standard size camera, and the one on the inside is for the camera that came along with it. It's a micro style camera, which is great because this camera is way better than the Eachine one. I'm just going to go ahead and say that, and make sure it's plugging in the right direction again. Sometimes you'll get it wrong. Just go ahead and tuck your cables down there, and when you seat this, those carbon slots should go through the bottom of the frame, and you should see them sticking out the bottom, just like nice and flush with the bottom of the frame. If one is not in there, it's going to cause you problems when you go to put the top plate on. These are a little bit finicky. If you need to take your driver to push one side over or the other, that's always a good way to help get them into the slot. That's looking pretty good. So now our camera's mounted up and plugged in. Now we can go ahead and grab our posts. And so far this has been a really easy build, going pretty well. So go ahead and grab those flush mount screws, and make sure you have your M3 driver for those. And go ahead and grab those flush mount screws out of your pile over there, and go ahead and put all four of those in. And we're just gonna push our finger on the bottom of the bolt and just do a hand tighten at first. This is a really quick way to just get them on there. Don't worry about your driver at this point, and keep tightening them until they're flush, and you can go back with your driver later and you can tighten those up. Now I'm going to do the next one over. That's looking pretty good there. And awesome. Now I can just give it a couple turns there, and you can hold that post with your finger. Just give it a tiny turn there to make sure it's nice and tight. Same thing with this one. And now those two are good to go. So now we're going to look at the back of the quad and go ahead and grab the first post and the second one and go ahead and install those. And I don't know if it's you or me, but this build feels a lot easier than the one I did on Friday for you guys for the TYRO99. And I love that the VTX is an all-in-one VTX with flight controller, so you don't have to worry about the VTX being on top of the quad. And there's a lot more room on top of this quad. So go ahead and grab these parts. We're going to install the buzzer, the LEDs, and this back vertical post, this carbon post. And you want to make sure that this is facing up like that, and it goes through this hole right there. So go ahead and take your first, this is your lock washer, and your lock washer is going to go in between the carbon on one side, and it's going to help that that nut we're going to fasten down stay nice and tight back there. You can grab your driver, and this is the same size driver as what you're going to use on your motors, so this is kind of nice. It's the same exact size nut. And once that's tight, go ahead and tuck those wires in right there, and now we're going to seat the vertical post. We're going to take that LED wire and just run it through here, because we're going to plug in the LEDs and mount the LEDs on the outside of those back posts. Just want those to get seated just like that. And it's likely that these are going to fall out later as you're moving things around, but you can reseat them once you're ready to put your top on. So we still have a few more steps to do. Alright, so we got the SMA connector out there, and now we can plug in the LEDs. Don't have to do any soldering here either. This is pretty sweet. I'll just take these, and you want to make sure that the teeth are facing the right way again. This is super important. I've bent these before, and it really sucks when you bend them, because you have to get a razor blade or something in there to bend them back. They don't always break when you bend them. It just makes it a pain. So you can go ahead and twist these wires up like I always do in my builds, and that makes things nice and tidy. And this is going to go on there just like this. And we're going to run 2 zip ties through those 2 holes you see there, just below the buzzer and around the posts. And then we'll move on to the next step. Nice. We're moving right along. So go ahead and grab one of your black zip ties, the smaller ones, and go ahead and run one of these around the post through your LED and buzzer board right there. It's stuck on the receiver. Stuff gets kind of small. This is why my hands get all torn up, because trying to deal with this stuff in such small spaces all the time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and crank that down, but not all the way yet, because you want to leave a little bit of slack to do the other side, and then you can tighten down both sides and make sure it's center. Okay, so now I got both on there. That's looking pretty good. I tuck that wire up inside there. And you can go ahead and screw on your antenna at this point. It's going to make it a little easier for you later. And once you're done with this build, you can use a smoke stopper. I recommend finding a smoke stopper on Hobby King or Amazon or somewhere. That way you're not going to have a problem with something. If something's touching or shorted out somewhere, you're going to fry something on here and your quad's not going to fly. So a smoke stopper is about $7 to $8, and it's well worth the money because it'll protect your investment. Then you can basically take things back apart, look at it with a magnifying glass, make sure you don't have any solder bridging over to another tab sitting next to it. This is looking pretty good. So now we can install the receiver on the bottom side of the top plate. And you go ahead and grab some VHB. And you're just going to cut that to fit. And this stuff is awesome. Like I said, it's like some of the best stuff in the hobby. It really does secure things, and it also gives a little bit of vibration isolation between the frame and whatever component you're putting it on. You take a little razor blade and pop that tab back and just peel that off. And we're going to put this on the underside of this plate right here. So flip it around, and you can see that on the very top part of this plate, what's going to be the top should be where you have those countersunk holes right there. It's really important that you put it on the correct way, because otherwise your bolts are going to be kind of sticking on the carbon the wrong way. So we're going to face the receiver facing back. And yes, one of my antennas fell off of this receiver. I'm just going to have to put a new one on before my maiden. You can run your zip tie through here as well, and this will just help keep it in place so that it doesn't fall off. The more you touch that gray VHB too, the less tacky it is. So try not to touch it too much with your fingers. And we're just going to run this around and make sure it's nice and snug. And so after you snip that zip tie off, the next step is mounting the top plate. And this is awesome because you're pretty much finished at this point with your build. So you're going to put your zip ties through on the top. Make sure these slots are seated in the bottom and in the front right here. And you can use your driver right here just to push the sidewall sometimes over, because they're a little bit crooked sometimes. Kind of hard to do with your fingers, but go ahead and grab that countersunk style screw, that bolt, and just put that in the front. And make sure the holes are nice and lined up, because it's going to strip the top of the stand off if you don't. And it's going to be really hard for the bolt to go through into the standoff. So make sure everything is nice and lined up. Right now I'm just kind of lightly tightening these down, and then I'll finish it up once I get the driver into the handle. All right, doing the third one here. And I'll go ahead and grab my handle and go ahead and give these a nice and tight right here. Gives you another couple turns. Now the last one back here. And that's pretty much it. Now all we have to do is install the antenna zip tie right here off the top of the quad, off the back. I usually like to mount my antennas off the back of the quad, so I have plenty of space for my GoPro or whatever type of camera I'm going to put on the front of the quad. I'm not a big fan of really putting them on the arms. I know a lot of people do that, but I like to have them up top, and I never have any fail safes or signal problems. I also feel like it keeps them a little bit further away from the props, because they're not super tall. So now all you have to do is make sure this bends away from the center of the quad like that direction. When you put your zip tie on, go ahead and put some heat shrink on your first piece. If you're using the Harbor Freight stuff, you're going to use 2 pieces just like this. And now you can grab a heat gun and heat shrink this down. And I use a torch sometimes, but you have to make sure your torch is well away from your electronics. I'm just an old school hobby guy, so I use the torch a lot instead of a heat gun. It's a lot quicker. So now I'm ready to go there. And now I'm pretty much done with the antenna part until I put that second antenna on there, which I'm going to need. So you're going to repeat that process for both sides if you have the antenna with the receiver with 2 antennas, which most of you do. So that's looking pretty good there. Looking very nice. And I'm going to weigh this coming up as well for you guys. We're going to do a weigh off with the TYRO99 and this TERO quad, as they call it, the GearBest version. And so far the GearBest version is really winning. A lot of my friends really like the GearBest version. They've seen this one and they like it a little bit better. The components just look a little nicer, and the VTX is 800 milliwatts, so there's a lot of positives of this. Really nice smooth carbon fiber, a lot more room, 4 bolts on the top plate, no side plates to deal with, very easy to get to stack. I'm just going to trim that larger zip tie off there, and that's holding that battery wire against being pulled, and I do that in all my builds and on my bind and flies. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a weigh off between the Banggood one and the GearBest one on the left there. This is the TYRO99 and the TERO Q215 on the left hand side. Let's go ahead and do the Banggood one first, because you guys saw this, the $99 quad, 318 grams, 318.6 grams with props and all the hardware on there, and that's not too bad. And the TERO Q215, 301.5 grams. That's lighter. So this one is lighter than the Banggood version, and all the bells and whistles on this one seem to be quite a bit better. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that coming up here. Just a few comparisons between these two, what makes this one better than the other one, and I'll go ahead and show you that now. So starting off, this one is a little bit smaller. The TYRO99 just a little bit smaller, and I don't like all the bolts on the bottom of the one on the right. The one on the left, the TERO Q215, is completely flat on the bottom, no hardware hanging out off the bottom, and the carbon is much nicer on the TERO Q215 kit. It has beveled edges on it, it's nicely polished, and they did remove a lot of the excess carbon dust off this kit, so when you're handling it, your hands don't turn black. And they're both the same thickness there on these arms, both exactly the same thickness, both 5 mil, but the Q215 just looks a little bit better quality. And I love that the entire top plate of this is completely flat. So this, in my opinion, is a better choice. For the extra $12, I would put my money down on this one first. I love this low profile look that they have going on here. Nothing is floating up top. The motors are decent. The 2206 motors they have on here with the 2600 kV, it's going to be a nice freestyle or racing quad motor. You can upgrade these later. I love the pagoda on there. And this antenna is much shorter than the one on the TYRO99. Is really tall, and there's not enough GoPro room here because you got this VTX sitting here, whereas this one has a long flat top on the top. So, and you have the VTX underneath there. The antenna sticking out the back is underneath. It's just not a whole lot of room there. So this one, I just prefer this flat mount. You can put a TPU mount on the front of it with your GoPro. You can buy TPU mounts all over the place. So a lot of positives and negatives about both of these versus. This is the motor wires, the plastic motor wires on the TYRO99 on the right. I hate those. I do not like the plastic motor wires. So a better choice for silicone coating on the TERO Q215. And the hardware on the bottom sticking out on the TYRO99 is not good. All the flush hardware on the TERO Q215 is much better. It's not going to rub on your battery. So you're going to have to figure out how to mount your battery on the bottom of the TYRO. And the antenna is way taller back here. This is a little bit excessive. These antennas look to be kind of like an older antenna that was maybe left over in stock. And this is a newer style, shorter antenna. So a little less prone to damage, sticking up a lot less. And it has a horizontal mount, which most people want. So in my opinion, this one is a little bit better. And it just seems to be more up to date for the money. So extra $12 is what I would do there. But thanks again for watching this build video, guys. And if this helps you out, please do enter in my Patreon there, and you can possibly win this quad or some other quad coming up. But take care, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.